And so today, anti-inflammatory drugs, could they target depression? Sure, temporarily you might feel better, but the intoxication will worsen, it will weaken you, it will drive you further into states of no energy and more depression long term if you don't get stimulated via SSRIs into horrific, violent acts against yourself or others. So, with that, let's welcome Lisa Rooney from Vibrant Life Integrative Coaching. The easiest way I like to say to get there is vibrantlife247.com. And when you reach out, say RSP says hello. I always do, even when she's not here. Lisa, welcome back to the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Hello.
There you are.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can now. Lisa.
How are you today?
I'm a little pumped up. Yesterday, I was exhausted from the trip. We had a 4-day beautiful trip, a spiritual journey with my wife. We had a wonderful weekend, but exhausted, not sleeping as much, and so it's just nice to be back. And today, I'm already back on like feeling on top of the world and so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here too. And this whole conversation about treating depression with anti-inflammatory drugs, I don't want to minimize when someone is struggling with depression. I've had periods of depression during my life, and especially when someone is really struggling with a very intense clinical long-term depressive state. I mean, I don't want to minimize that. But I also think in our society we have forgotten the fact that depression is kind of a normal state of society. It's a normal state of life. Um, we don't want it to be long term. We don't want it to be all the time. We don't want it to go into deepness. But we're going to have periods where we're feeling great, everything's wonderful, and we're going to have periods where we're going to go into a depression. A depression is, it quiets us down. It gives us a chance to think about what's going on.
Mhm.
It's it's
Reflective
kind of,
time, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so we're very, very quick as a society to throw something at it, throw a drug at it because we can't feel that depression. But there's a lot of learning that can happen in depression. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things that we can become aware of. What are we depressed about? What is, what's going on? Uh,
Mhm.
the way I look at depression is oftentimes linked to anger that has been turned inward. So
Yeah.
what's going on there?
Well, and that's kind of that pendulum swing I was talking about. When you have the energy to be angry, it can be a positive emotion to stimulate you into action, to change something that you feel is wrong.
Yeah.
But if you can't or you feel powerless in that event, eventually it'll shift to frustration. And if you lose the energy for either anger and frustration, you can become depressed. And here I'm talking about the aspect of not just the emotions, which you focus on so well, but also the physical body. Just the production of energy is depleted over time, like being in a chronic state of the energy in fight or flight. It will, save your life in a short burst, but it can debilitate you and degenerate you long term.
Long term, right. Right, which is why I love homeopathic remedies, because when we have that state that appears, especially if it's as a result of a thought, an emotional state, and we handle that state utilizing the homeopathic remedies that give the body the information it needs to settle the system versus slamming it with a drug that suppresses it, then the body is able to come back into balance. And that's notwithstanding that we also have to, look at what's going on with our diet, what's going on with our sleep, what's going on with our environment, our EMF, all the things that you talked about.
Yeah. Well, this is again so much fun to be able to deliver information that I did not know growing up for the first 24 years of my life, having been raised pharmaceutically and allopathically. So the opportunity to talk homeopathy with you is brought even more joy. It's as if it's a remedy in and of itself. The energy that you bring, that we bring together, and the more I'm encountering homeopaths in real life, I'm like, hey, we're on the comeback trail. I don't want to get cocky, Lisa, but I'm feeling good about the direction.
Yeah, it does feel good. It does feel good. There's definitely a renaissance happening, I think. And I think, the COVID uh, thing really
Yeah.
however you want to call it, I mean, people were locking people in their homes on the internet. There's a whole bunch of people that really started doing research and really started trying to figure out other ways to handle things because what was happening wasn't sitting right.
Well, I like to use alliterations. I call it the COVID crazy years. In a
Right.
sense, many of us, I don't know, present company excluded, I would say, if you had a solid grounding or foundation in something like homeopathy or natural medicine, you tend not to abandon it because somebody tries to frighten you off of, because you've had enough, you've seen enough, you have the experience to go, oh, that's not, even if there is a legitimate concern, this is not the path to go down, that allopathic route of suppression all the time. This is not like, let's say, taking a broken bone and resetting it in, in a surgical theater, for instance, if need be. And so we relegate things to their appropriate places, and I don't want, Lisa, I don't want homeopathy to be a monopoly. I want freedom of thought, freedom of access to all forms of healing, and allow that to, let's say, naturally find its place, and people will gravitate to, I think, ultimately what works. And I think homeopathy will make its comeback, not because big pharma suddenly gets behind it because it's so profitable, but despite the fact that they've tried to suppress it for as long as the AMA was founded in 1847, 3 years after the American Institute of Homeopathy was founded. So there's been this antipathy towards one another. I don't tend to look at allopathic medicine in that way all the time everywhere, because we acknowledge its place, its rightful
Mhm.
place. But when
Absolutely.
they say we belong everywhere and homeopathy belongs nowhere, does anybody not get that that's out of balance a little, if not a lot?
Yeah. I mean, there's a synergistic effect of all of it. We can exist, we can coexist, we can help each other out, allopathic and homeopathic. I use not only homeopathy, but I use a lot of herbals. Use a lot of, minerals. I focus a lot on minerals in the body and making sure that the body has the minerals needed to function optimally. I have a lot of clients that are also doing acupuncture and Reiki, and like, just they're seeing a therapist. They're like, they're seeing their functional medicine doctor. They're taking supplements. Like, they're doing all kinds of things, and it all works together synergistically.
Yeah, exactly. As the body does with a lot of processes that, and I've often talked about the antagonistic relationship within the body of, let's say we've got to manage blood pressure. Sometimes it has to go up, sometimes it has to go down. We have to manage blood sugar. Sometimes it goes up. Sometimes, how about body temperature? Up, down, pH, this way, that way. And, this is to me, and this is maybe a controversial question, Lisa, but as a clinical homeopath, I found a lot of the quote unquote antidoting remedies to one another are sometimes overly simplistically interpreted, right? Oh, this remedy does the opposite of this remedy, therefore never take them together because they'll cancel each other out. And I'm thinking, well, that really can eliminate sometimes the wisdom of the body to go well beyond our mental thought processes, that it's only this superficial understanding of a direction of a remedy. And I'm not saying there's no clinical evidence that sometimes you could, take this remedy to stop something's going on here, but I'm just saying it's often interpreted, I believe, overly simplistically.
Yeah, I mean, it's fear based. For me, it's fear based, and even
Yeah.
within the realm of natural medicine, there's fear. And, I just don't subscribe to that. I use a lot of different remedies. I don't really look at what antidotes what. I look at what the body's telling me.
What does it need? Yes.
I listen to what the clients are telling me,
Hmm.
and I suggest remedies appropriately, accordingly.
That's why Lisa's the one that we're connected to now to say, hey, you need extra help, because I appreciate that response so much, because it's not always there among homeopaths that I've met. And it's not to say that they can't or don't help people. It's just there's a pragmatism that is lacking when you become so overly dogmatic,
Yeah.
instead of responding to the needs of people that are, showing things and saying things, and like, well, I can't, I'm going to ignore that because this book says, no, no, no. Always listen to what's being presented to you. And whether it's intuitive or experiential, or whether it's a knowledge of the materia medica or various ones, all of that comes into play. And yet we sometimes forget that energetic aspect of being a homeopath. It's not only the book knowledge.
Yeah. And one of my teachers, Dr. Jude, who is Robin Murphy's wife, widow, she always said, "You never know unless you're going to try.
Yeah.
If you don't try it, you're not going to know whether or not it works. If you've got a strong rationale for the remedy or
Mhm.
whatever it is that you're going to do, you're not going to know unless you try. So you have to set the fear aside and try it anyway."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, there are a couple of remedies in addition to the homeopathic hit later that we'll do together, that I know you wanted to cover, and these are really great remedies. Emotional, although nothing's only that, but significantly between Gelsemium, Staphysagria, and you can relate it,
Mhm.
I think, to how many people may be feeling, for instance, with the traumas of, the hurricanes, for instance. things that are associated with what's been going on in our lives, whether we're touched directly or indirectly. There might be some benefit to these remedies we'll discuss with you today. So I appreciate you bringing them forward, and
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you to introduce them and how to contextualize them in a general sense for this audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always, when we're getting ready to go on, I'm like, okay, what's going on in the world? What are people thinking? Where are we at seasonally? So we can have a conversation that's going to equip your audience with the remedies that they need to get through what's coming up. That's the practical application of homeopathy. That's the way I like to look at it. That's the way I've learned it. That's the way I teach my students. That's how I work with my clients. What's happening in your life? Let's learn, let's apply the remedies that are relevant to what's going on with you right now. And then
No.
everybody's good to go. But yeah, so that's why gelsemium came up for me, because gelsemium is really an interesting remedy. I'm going to talk about it from a physical standpoint, and then I'll talk about it from an emotional standpoint. And this is what I think is so cool about the remedies, is that there's always physical aspects of the remedies and there's emotional aspects of the remedies. And we can actually suggest homeopathic remedies based purely on the physical or purely on the emotional. It doesn't have to, they don't have to have every single characteristic of it. And that's one of the things that gives us a ton of freedom when it comes to these remedies, because we can hit all aspects of, what's going on. So gelsemium, this is the yellow jasmine plant. This is like the main flu remedy of all time. So we think dizzy, droopy, drowsy, and drained, the 4 Ds. So
It's kind
whenever
of like
the
the extra Snow White dwarfs.
right. Yeah, this is the classic flu that presents with chills. You're gonna, be fatigued, you're gonna be drained, there's weakness and fatigue on all levels. Um, it is also physically has a keynote of weakness after a fright or hearing bad news, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit when we talk about the emotional aspect of it. But the weakness is so much that you almost have an aversion to work, because you're just kind of worn out. You just don't want it. You can't think. You don't want to do anything. It's just weakness and fatigue. So that classic flu that presents, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling good. You might have a headache, you might have chills coming on. You're just so tired. You're just, droopy, drowsy, drained, those 4 Ds. I love that. So this is how the flu actually presents in my house when we get the flu. We don't get it that often, but when we do, this is how it presents in my house. So this is how I became aware of gelsemium. So I don't know. How does it present in your house, Robert?
Well, I think you're acting on an aspect which it can easily be overlooked, and this is for me these teachable moments when you
Mhm.
have the perspectives and the focal point. I've often talked about gelsemium more related to fear, which
Mhm.
can be a feeling, a sensation that you get emotionally when you're coming down with something. It could be influenza or other things, but also as you pointed out, there are other aspects when you look at a homeopathic remedy in the materia medica. And I have the big, thick, Borky that I use a
Yeah.
lot more than most. And you can now, the great thing, I don't know if you found this, Lisa, you can actually search up remedies online in various materials medica and it can appear. So you can find it quicker online too and read about what's in there. And for the most part, they've been accurately, pulled from them, which is nice to make it easier for folks. But the challenge that people will often be overwhelmed by is like there's too much in there. I read one thing, it didn't fit, and then they ignore the rest of it, like to
Yeah.
your point. And so to be able to talk about it like this, to give people if you feel that way, that's perfectly normal when you encounter a remedy. And I
Yeah.
don't want anybody to be intimidated by it. I know that it's kind of natural at first to go, oh, this is too much. But take the moment, take a breath, come back to it, and you'll find that the D's, as you call them, the 4 D's associated with influenza, while gelsemium is often indicated as a flu remedy, even though there are some people that have no sign of any flu, but they're about to take the biggest test or exam in their life tomorrow, and they're
Yes.
like, and that's gelsemium too.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. So that talks more about the emotional aspect of it.
right. But
Yeah.
in modern medicine, as much as they like to say, hey, let's make Ozempic the cure for everything as a drug, it's not really valid in a direct way like it is with homeopathy when you see the various ways it plays out.
Yeah.
Yes, there are a lot more flu remedies, and people maybe have heard of the oscillococcinum from
Mhm.
boron in France, the Anis barbarae, the duck liver kind of thing, and what they found, some kind of spirochete in there. And these are also legitimate flu remedies, some more prophylactic or preventive, and some are more reactive. We've talked about aconitum napellus as well as a right at the beginning. But to focus on gelsemium, I appreciate this so much because y'all are heading into that season, and most of you in this audience are like not falling to the flu shot syringe in the tailpipe anymore. You're not falling for that
Right.
dupe, right? But you're
Yeah.
going, all right, well, what now? Now that you're, and so this is a great thing leading into so-called flu season and
Well, this
more.
was actually the remedy that was used in the flu of 1918.
Hmm.
This was the remedy when all the homeopaths got together and they talked about, okay, what remedy did we all use to help people with it with that flu? By and large, across the globe, pre-texts and internet, this was the remedy that was used. So we know that this is a remedy that we can use today
Hmm.
for the classic flu that presents in this way.
Yeah. By the way, we've done some of these as homeopathic hits, but the opportunity to get with Lisa every month provides this opportunity to go a little bit deeper on one or two or even more, which is kind of fun. And you'll hear through the conversation. I think we can learn more sometimes than just by here. Let me present this to you. So
Yeah.
it's just like a living classroom in that sense. And if we look at gelsemium as a remedy, which we've covered before, it might not have hit every angle in that 5 minute time that I have each show to talk about what we're talking about here, even though it did reference when we did this before flu like type symptoms as it relates to one of the things in a general sense. But now we get to go a little bit deeper.
So let me tell you a story because you know I love stories. You hear the story and then you remember, oh, that's how Lisa used it. Maybe, that maybe I can use it in my house.
Hmm.
So my son went away for fall break and he went to visit some friends of his. And when he went up north and everybody kind of had a sniffle or a cold or a flu there was just a lot going on. He came back about 2 days later. He calls me up and he's like, Mom, I don't feel good. And I'm like, what's going on? Well, he had a sore throat, which is his general presentation of something going on. It hits his throat first. He had chills. He was starting to feel run down and he needed to sleep. He's like, I came home from class and I slept for like 4 hours. And I was like, babe, sounds like the flu. Why don't you start with gelsemium? Now he
Hmm.
wasn't running a fever. He wasn't full blown at that point. I
Yeah.
said, go grab your kit, grab gelsemium. I want you to take it. I kind of, got sort of an intensity rating from him. 1 out of 10, 10 being the worst, one being, it's hardly bothering me at all. He was maybe at a 3 or so. I'm like, so take it about every 3 hours, and and he felt better. It didn't like pull him out of the flu because he already was into it, but it certainly shortened the duration and it allowed him to do the basics that he needed to do for a few days while his body was recovering. But
Beautiful.
that fatigue, I came home from class and I slept. I could not keep my eyes open, Mom. That was the clue for me that he probably needed gelsemium.
Hmm.
So all your listeners, if you're taking notes, make sure you have this in a 30C and a 200C in your house coming into flu season. And what I would say is if I had known that all of his friends were sick and if he had had his kit with him, I would have said start taking gelsemium right now because
Hmm.
that might have headed off.
And y'all, just as an aside, when you think about, let's say, buying something to bring into your home, and I've taught people about how to make remedies a little bit like that, but not people are going to do that all the time or much at all, maybe. And yes, we still have, thank God, access to these remedies. I don't personally sell anything here. Lisa, you might have some things, I don't know, kits, whatever, but I just want to put that out there that the remedies, if you store them just in a basic way, no extremes of light, heat, all of that stuff, electromagnetic fields, it'll last forever. It's not going to go bad. So
Yeah.
you're not going to, oh, well, if I buy this gelsemium and I don't use it in 10 years, no, 10 years from now it's still going to be good. I got remedies that are 30 years old. There are stories of finding remedies that were over 100 years old that still had a functional efficacy. So it's unique in the field of medicine and even herbalism. Herbs don't tend to have that potency that long in a material full mother substance state, but the homeopathy outlasts everything and making it I'm going to say this. This is a weird way to say it, Lisa, but to physically make a remedy maintains its integrity forever in a sense. Whereas there are electromagnetic devices,
Mhm.
if you've seen these things, EAV devices that can actually mimic the energies and infuse into medicated pellets or the virgin pellets or liquid. But those remedies don't tend to last. That's what my experience has been. You got to use them pretty quick. They don't have that in that physical aspect of the making of those remedies. Have you found anything similar?
I haven't found that to be true.
Okay.
I've found them to be efficacious, for long periods of time. Um, have I actually looked at whether or not they're still working, like a side by side comparison? I haven't really done that, so
Yeah.
you know,
It could be a bias that I have, but I believe that let's say throwing energy into something in an energy to energy sense versus the physical world that we're in.
mhm,
Sometimes I'm like, oh man, that's an important aspect of what's unique about these remedies too. Even though the irony is we're using it in its essence for energy, right?
right.
So anyway, I love how again, if you can tell I'm digging it, love this discussion, Lisa. Appreciate you so much. Now, vibrantlife247.com, has anybody reached out to you and said, "Hey, can you help me out?" Or "What are you doing? What else can I do? Can I take some classes?" Anything like that?
Yeah, yeah. So I actually, well, I've had a handful of people reach out. Thank you very much. Please go to my website. If you're interested in a conversation, just book a discovery call. They'll give us the opportunity to talk about what's going on in your life, what you need help with, whether it's a homeopathic consult or whether you need, you're looking for more coaching and homeopathy within that, within that program. All the things that are going on. We talked last week about cell salts, right?
Oh yeah, we had a question come in about them.
Yeah, we
You
had
know,
we had a question come in about, so she reached out to me and, asked, we talked about the 3 mineralizing, cell salts, calc fluor, calc phos, and silica, and she wanted to know if she could administer all of these at the same time, how often to take them and everything, and that's one of the things that's beautiful about the cell salts. They're kind of a subset of homeopathy.
mhm.
They're minerals that are found in the body. And so when we're utilizing cell salts, I always think about it as remineralizing. So we can't really go wrong with cell salts. They're just so gentle. They can work right alongside any homeopathic remedy. Homeopathic remedies tend to come from outside of the body. Cell salts come from inside of the body. So they're part of the body. They're of everything that we're made up of. So we can dose them together. Those three, I would mix them all together, dose them together. You can dose them multiple times throughout the day. You can dose them twice a day. You can put it in water, all three in water, and send it to school in your kid's water bottle. They're just so versatile and so easy. So that was one of the questions that I got between our last conversations.
Yeah, let's see. We had another one on looks like insomnia and depression from Liz. I don't know if Super Don, if you have that visually. If not, no worries. But question of the day. Oh, there it is. So this is Liz talking about insomnia, depression, lots of trauma when a child, large part of her colon removed. Oh, good Lord. Overweight, arthritis in hand. These are complex things made more complex by allopathic interventions, too, I want to say. She says, maybe lots of separate problems going on, but I recall when I was pregnant 4 times, she says, I never suffered from any depression and felt great. Just wondering if there's a hormone that is produced in pregnancy that could help me now. If I could up those levels, is it testosterone? I just feel in my gut that there's something key there that what happens when I'm pregnant. She says she's currently age 60, so not likely it could happen, but a lot of folks at 60 are no longer in the fertility realm and they've moved on to the menopause realm. But it's fascinating how doctors will say, sometimes they're mystified by female stuff and they'll go, well, just get pregnant, it'll go away.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm telling, I don't know if you've heard that. I've not heard it said to me, but I know others who it's been said to. So
So this was an interesting question, and let's talk about this, and then we'll go back to the emotional aspects of gelsemium because I want to make sure that your listeners hear that as
sure.
well. But I think I introduced in maybe the first or second conversation that we had, when clients come to me, I'm looking at their case through the lens of three different things. What are their traumas? What's the toxicity, and what are the thoughts? So there's a lot that can be unpacked within this case. There's a lot of information and there's a lot of, as a coach, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of curiosity here, about what's going on. So, in talking about this, I'm going to bring in some homeopathic miasmic miasmatic principles, and I want to talk a little bit through the lens of Chinese five elements, which are all the things that I incorporate within my practice when I'm looking at a case like that. The first thing I want to know is why was the colon removed? You know, our colon is how we get rid of junk in our body, right? So what was going on that piece of our body either got backed up or notwithstanding, was there a physical trauma and she had to go
Sure.
into surgery and then it had to be removed? That's a different scenario.
Yeah.
But sometimes when people have their colons removed, the issue is maybe constipation, and they can't, things are just not moving. It's not moving.
Remember, I talked at the opening today about systemic unremittent inflammation that never resolves, right? And that often happens in the colon because there are so many invisible synthetic chemicals coming in that weren't part of the food supply throughout the history of humanity, that only in the last 100 or so years have become commonplace, and even more like the glyphosate. It's like I kind of talk about, if you want to recover from a wound, a scrape, a cut, you might use, calendula or even silver topically, and it'll accelerate it. But if in between each application you take sandpaper and re-injure it, which is much like what people do in ignorance by eating the food that they don't know is creating chronic systemic inflammatory responses. So we have remedies that can address that. But if you keep putting the inflammatory triggers in, we never resolve it. So there might be emotional things associated with why is somebody in a pattern of behavior that is even unbeknownst to them self-destructive.
Yeah, yeah. We call that a maintaining cause, which I think is, it's a great way to think about it. What is maintaining? What's the thing that whether we keep doing, whether it's the emotions or whether it's, how we're eating, the toxicity, whatever it is, what's the maintaining cause that's keeping you in that place?
Hmm.
Remedies can certainly help, but especially when it comes to, if you keep, like you said, you keep scratching the wound open, there's only so much that a remedy can
Why
do.
isn't that remedy working?
Yeah,
Dagnabbit.
we have to deal with that maintaining
Right.
cause.
Yes.
But, when I think of the colon, I want to know, okay, from an emotional standpoint, what are you holding on to? Or what is it that you're not able to let go of?
Hmm.
Especially in the case of constipation. You know, the colon falls within that tubercular miasm, and the emotion that is ruled in that miasm or the emotion that is associated with that miasm is grief. So if grief is unexpressed by the colon and by getting it all backed up, and then the colon is removed, where does that grief go? How does the
Mm.
body handle that grief?
Right.
Well, in Chinese five element, it goes towards the liver.
Yes, yes. It's interesting that concept too of, holding an emotion in and suppressing it. And maybe you take something that absolves that feeling or sensation, doesn't take away the reason that it exists, if you use a medication to do it. So it'll end up manifesting in some other way, some other place, like you point out. Sometimes we know throughout the history of thousands of years of these so called natural remedy or medicine philosophies, practices, if you will, bringing that up. And those connections are not taught in allopathic Western medical schools.
Mm-mm. No, and when you look at it through these lenses, again, we talked about synergistically. How can all this stuff, be synergistically? How can we use it as this big tool where we can really take a look at what's going on in someone's life? That's why I like to bring, and I've taken a lot of time to really understand these different methods of looking at the body and looking at healing. So if the anger goes to the liver, then we look at the liver, and within that Chinese five element theory, the liver governs tendons and joints,
Mm-hmm.
and the emotion associated with the liver is anger. And so, what is arthritis? She talked about having arthritis. Arthritis are angry joints. So, my curiosity in this case is there some level of suppressed anger going on? She talked about trauma and she mentioned depression. We talked about earlier, depression can be anger turned inward. She talked about trauma as a child. So is there grief? Is there suppression? Are there unprocessed emotions going on? The colon would tell me there's probably unprocessed emotions. The depression tells me there's unprocessed emotions. Insomnia, that tells me there's something going on. We need peace for sleep. So what's disturbing her peace? Why is she having insomnia? Is she having difficulty going to sleep or is she having night waking? And depending on what time she's waking in the middle of the night would tell me which organ is really struggling. Which one do we need to be focused on? If she's waking from 1 to 3, that's liver. If she's waking from 3 to 5, then there's grief. So what's, that all these are all the ways the body speaks to us and
Yes, the
tells us
language that
what's
we
going
were not taught. In fact, those of us who learned that language eventually were relegated to outcasts in civil medical society.
Yeah. Yeah. So then she asked the question about pregnancy. She's happy when she's pregnant and she's unhappy when she's not pregnant. She goes into depression. She has insomnia. Is there a hormonal disruption going on? Yeah. I mean, clearly, pregnancy as a pregnancy in and of itself is a hormonal disruption. And when
Mhm.
the hormones don't settle after pregnancy and we go into a depression, then I'm always curious about progesterone levels.
Mm.
Progesterone is that happy hormone. So, what do we need to give the body to get it back into balance so it can produce the hormones so we can be happy?
Yes.
And you mentioned one of the remedies earlier. Sepia is a great remedy for postpartum depression.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's I acknowledge this, and I think about when I was first learning homeopathy, how overwhelming it could be to, pick up a materia medica and
Oh, yeah.
begin to go, "What? I got to learn this?" But it's like, how do you eat an elephant? If you're a vegetarian, you don't, of course. But the one bite at a time response, the joke about that. And in that sense, to do this like we're doing occasionally is probably enough. I don't want to give anybody homeopathic indigestion either, but I don't think that'll happen. I think that the shift is on. The acceptance, almost the drawing. They're like pulling it, like more, Lisa, more, Robert. I want more. I'm like, oh
There's
no, it's too much. You're not gonna like. And I'm like having to let go of my emotional resistance over the years, knowing how much of an outcast. Not that it bothered me personally, because I've always been a kind of an independent. You can say what you want, I don't care. But the reality is, I want people. I do desire them to learn these things. I want them to know about it. I don't have all the extra time in the world to teach them other than these homeopathic hits each day, which is something probably better than a lot that I would have considered than to do this once a month with you. And I want you to mention here, because we got more to discuss, including the homeopathic hit today. For those that are new to you, that haven't seen you previous, and by the way, you can go back and listen. And I hope that, Lisa, you're able to grab some of these clips and put them out even further. I want you to know that you can reach out to Lisa. And maybe, Lisa, you can share again the things that you offer, the things that are opportunities for people that listen and go, I really like this. I want more.
Yes. So I kind of specialize in anxiety, overwhelm, emotional trauma, stress, upset, depression, grief. I kind of specialize in all of the things of the mind. But nothing, our bodies are not segmented. So what's happening in the mind is showing up in the body. So many of my clients have all kinds of physical issues. This case that we just talked about, it is very common. I see these kind of things very common. So I offer coaching and homeopathic consults. When someone decides that they want to work with me from a coaching standpoint, we meet a couple of times a month. We're going through. I'm doing a homeopathic assessment, so we're getting remedies that are going to be working in the background as I am also working to support you in terms of what's going on emotionally. We go through our values. We address all your traumas. It's kind of an ongoing discussion to help move you from where you are today into where you want to be. And
Mhm.
we just get you really clear on, all the things that are happening, what your body is telling you, where are your values, where are your traumas, so that you can move forward in your life. But
Wonderful.
some people don't need coaching. Some people are not interested in coaching. So if you're just looking for homeopathic consults, I offer that as well. You know,
Nice.
you would meet with me and we do usually I do a package of 3, because so that we can have some longevity. Uh, you know, one session is great, but then
Follow
as the
on. Things
remedies
shift.
work, yeah, as
Yeah.
the remedies work,
Yeah.
what comes up next? And so, it's important to me to work with people, in a longer period of time so that we can really affect change in your life.
Mhm.
I want people to start somewhere and end someplace different.
All right. Well, we got about 5 minutes before the planned homeopathic hit that'll go into something known as preacher's voice. Interestingly enough, as I occasionally preach here, and I don't want to overlook these remedies that are not as commonly prescribed, but once you know them, you're like, ooh, I'm glad I know that one. Uh, Staphysagria,
Mhm.
really cool remedy. Just to say it, you sound cool. Staphysagria. What? What? What do you say? And as it relates to some of the subjects we've covered, including again some of the emotional elements of post-hurricane, realities as well. Maybe
Yeah.
tie a little bit in for folks to learn about this remedy.
Yeah, so when I think about Staphysagria, this is any complaint that originates from anger or from insults or from a humiliation, and usually they've been swallowed. So that insult, it cuts like a knife. It feels really intense. But the anger is generally suppressed or it's not allowed to be expressed.
Hmm.
So that person may feel guilty for expressing the anger, or they might even feel guilty for even feeling angry. Or if they feel the anger and they're not able to get it out, it's suppressed. They don't have there's no way that they can express it, and so they have to swallow it back down. This is a remedy I always consider in any cases of abuse, emotional, physical, especially if there's sexual abuse, a history of rape, or any type of sexual insult. But really, any kind of abuse where the insult has been suppressed.
Yeah, it
Um,
fits the picture well. And we did a homeopathic hit a while back on Staphysagria, or Staphysagria, as you say. It's Latin, so we got a lot of leeway in speaking out. How do we say it? But I'm grateful as well for this remedy, because right now, if we speak specifically of some current events in the United States with um, for instance, in North Carolina, where the devastation hit after the hurricane, but even more so following that, the lack of what people consider appropriate support from government agencies like FEMA or
yeah,
blocking, there can be emotions that well up associated with what we described or what you just described with this remedy Staphysagria. So it can be something to help. It's not going to take away, the reality of the situation as much. I find it helps us to deal with it more effectively, efficiently, so we're not stuck, in the emotion of it, and we can move on into how do we remediate the situation?
yes, and think go back to what we started this conversation with, the inflammatory state. The Staphysagria helps to reduce that inflammatory state that comes up from the anger. It doesn't take away what you're angry about. It doesn't take away the scenario, but it settles you in such a way that you can work the problem, you can deal with it.
Yeah, so you can't take a bottle of Staphysagria and spray it on a FEMA agent who's not doing his job. It's not going to help. But the point is helping you so you can, deal better with the things that happen in life that could result in the manifestation of things that match up emotionally to this remedy.
Right. Yeah, you can use it chronically, you can use it acutely. This was a remedy that I always had on hand when my son would come home from his soccer games and they lost, and he
Mm.
was upset at him. It was either a really hard loss or he was
Yeah,
really angry with himself because maybe he felt like he had made a mistake. I always had it on the ready, and he'd come in and
right.
he'd be mad, and I'd hand him a dose, and I'd see him take a deep breath, and then he'd talk about it, and then he'd be like, "Okay, mom," and then he'd, head off to his room.
Yeah, especially since it would be inappropriate in America to give them a glass of sangria. Staphysagria would be better.
Right.
In in Europe, of course, they have a different relationship to that. So
Right.
I throw that out there. So okay, so let's talk further about a remedy here that I think is pretty interesting, and it is basically the homeopathic hit of the day. And you guys get a double dose because we actually a lot more than that, but also the fun that we get to do when we cover these things together with Lisa Rooney, vibrantlife247.com. Check it out. Let's do the homeopathic hit of the day.
Playing all of the homeopathic hits every day, right here on The Robert Scott Bell Show.
Now, Lisa, can't you imagine like Casey Kasem counting down the hit, right? The homeopathic hits of the day back in the day.
Right.
I think that would have been cool, but it's close. Anyway, Arum triphyllum. And I want to say thank you as well to Trinity School of Natural Health, trinityschool.org. They are such great supporters of health freedom, this message. Also, they do have homeopathy classes. I do a clinical homeopathy 101 plus on demand as well. Also, my friends at Folium PX, I'm so grateful for Folium and the ability to take botanical blends and also use them to reduce the intoxication from heavy metals, ionizing radiation as well. And also, of course, Lisa Rooney, Vibrant Life 24/7, making these homeopathic hits possible. Remedy also often indicated for sore throats, hoarseness, nasal irritation. And as with all of these hits, they can never be as comprehensive like our discussion today, a little bit more. But this Arum triphyllum, it's also got other names. Jack in the pulpit. It's kind of like this, the preacher's voice. You're like, oh, I can't. I'm not speaking. I'm trying to preach, and I can't do it. Indian turnip is another common way to describe it. Native to North America. That's so cute, Super Don. Look at that. Look at the comb over and everything. I don't know if that was Trump inspired or something, but it's a very cute plant that Super Don got there. Anyway, so as we look at the issues of throat, hoarseness, nasal irritation, this is a great way when we're dealing with inflamed mucous membranes, respiratory and throat discomfort. And so as we scroll down and see some of these key characteristics manifest, there's a rawness or soreness associated with the throat, the nasal irritation that, I've talked about a lot of remedies. Sometimes they may not match like this one will. And even raw and cracked lips are indicated in this remedy. Now, if you're doing self-help, I would say low potencies, you're on your own, no problem. You're not going to hurt yourself. 10x, 12x, 15x, 12c, 30, whatever it is. If you're going for the medium or higher potencies, like we've talked to Lisa before, try and find somebody who can match up, let's say a preponderance of the indications. What is the picture? Does it match or not? If you're going to go to those higher potencies, so you'll succeed. I don't want you to fail. And other remedies to consider complementary. If one doesn't match or you want to try it safely, belladonna can be redness, burning, sore throat, itching. One of my favorite remedies, hypersulfurous or hypersol calc, hypersol, raw inflamed mucous membranes. Euphrasia is an interesting one. Nasal throat irritation could do more than that, sneezing, raw mucus, and verbascum, which is the great 976 Robert voice or the 1900 Robert voice, that low, husky growl, or if you're a smoker, right? That could be it. So, as we go through this, if anything comes up, again, it's not a remedy that I've used every day, right? Like some of them come out and jump out first. Lisa, anything that you want to add to the Arum triphyllum?
Yeah, this was a new remedy for me. I've never used this remedy. I really haven't. Really wasn't even very aware of it. I
Yeah,
mean, we have what
sometimes you don't hit the
thousand
radar that
remedies.
often.
Yeah, yeah. But I looked up in the Materia Medica. I have Robin Murphy's,
Yep.
and I thought this was really interesting. It said that keynote irresistible desire to pick the nose
Mm.
from inflammation of nerve endings in the nose. And it talked about the desire to bore your nose like into the pillow. I thought that was a really, we look at
That's a
those.
very specific thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I look at those as like confirmatory symptoms. And a confirmatory symptom is like, okay, you're looking at two remedies. They're almost identical. You might be looking at HEPAR and you might be looking at this remedy, and the voice and the burning and the hoarseness, it seems really the same. So how do you choose? You look for those confirmatory symptoms. And
Great.
so I thought that was really interesting when I saw that, but it's not a remedy that I have used.
But I love it because that's the way to expand upon even the various materia medica that might have nuance. A lot of times you'll see a lot of similarities because there's certain things that come out. And then over time, homeopathy's been around since the late, 1790s when Hahnemann first, developed it. There's a lot that's gone on this planet since that time. So trying to keep up with some of the developments, including new remedies that are identified and proven, or speculate on whatever. This is the process that Lisa is adding so much to as we discuss this to hopefully make it more accessible. I mean, my gosh, if we come out of this and I get responses are like, I have no idea. I thought I knew it, but you and Lisa, oh good Lord, I can't do this. I don't think that'll happen. But I'm saying we'll find a remedy for you if that's the case. So this is awesome, Lisa. You're so much fun, and I would hope that you would avail yourself of Lisa's wise counsel in homeopathy and as a life coach too. And is there a best way besides going to vibrantlife247.com that you want people to reach out to you?
Either that, or you can email me at lisa@vibrantlife247.com.
Easy enough.
Go to my website. The best thing to do is go to my website, take a look at the Work With Me page. There's a handful of things that I offer there. And if you want to have a conversation, just schedule a discovery call. It'll get you on my schedule. It's a free call. We'll talk for 20 or 30 minutes about what's going on, and then we'll figure out what you need. And it mentioned that you heard me on the RSB show.
Yeah, please do say hello. I heard you, and Lisa, you were awesome, so wonderful, and it really balances out the ridiculous raw masculinity of me and Super Don. What you bring to it, I couldn't bring, not even if I tried, a million times over. So for me, that makes my heart happy. I don't know if that sounds masculine, but it does, and I don't care.
Same here. Same here. It's the synergy. It's all good.
Beautiful. Lisa Rooney, vibrantlife247.com, extended homeopathic hits. If you missed anything, I realize some of you go, I can't keep up. There's too many remedies. The good news is this becomes a podcast later, and you can replay it on Rumble, where it's on a video, unite.live, brighteon.com, and various social media platforms that haven't banned us. And again, you guys share the good news. This is something that can open up the possibilities for healing where you thought that weren't anything. And the fact is, remedies are not just physical, even though they focus so much on the physical and allopathic medicine. And when they focus on the emotional, like the opening story today, Lisa, about, hey, if we can just suppress inflammation, maybe they won't be depressed. Well, there's some element of truth to that. But if they do so by suppression rather than honoring the process of the body and knowing why they're happening, we end up worse off. That's, we drive things deeper into chronicity, and that's not what we're investing in here.
My very, very first homeopathic teacher, way, way back 20 years ago, said, Lisa, the suppressed case will always go wrong. And I've never forgot that. The suppressed case will always go wrong.
Quote Lisa on that, even though it came from her mentor. The suppressed case will always go wrong. Love that. We'll wrap it up here on the Robert Scott Bell Show, Hour 1. We've got a whole other hour of broadcast healing, and including some news about, more drugs and vaccines for the oh, good Lord. Yeah, I got to cover these things because people they aren't getting the memo on some of these issues. So we'll keep doing it. But Lisa, can't wait for the next appearance. Anytime you got breaking news, let us know. Or if you're going to be somewhere, we want to let the audience know to meet you on besides online, of course. Let me know.
Thanks. All right. You guys have a great day.
All right, Lisa Rooney, God bless you. Thank you for helping me bring the power to heal back where it belongs with each and every one of you, which is why I remind myself too when I say this: the power to heal is yours.